Welcome to the world of Eora, a news and lore podcast about the Pillars of Eternity games, as well as Obsidian Entertainment's upcoming release, Avowed. Hello players and welcome to the show. I'm your host Eric, aka Gingerino. Thank you guys again for tuning in to another episode of lore for the world of Eora as it has to do with Pillars of Eternity and the upcoming Obsidian game, Avowed. For those not sure why we're pairing those two games together, or at least the game series of Pillars of Eternity and the game of Avowed, it's because they share the same fantasy world called Eora. So as the theory goes, if we dive into the history, lore, and game mechanics of Pillars of Eternity, it will give us a bit of insights and information as to what we can expect from Avowed, or at least speculate a little better as they drip feed us content. As well, it gives us Pillars of Eternity nerds a chance to geek out and learn about the world that we love to play in through Pillars of Eternity. Today, we're going to be talking about the gods of Eora, especially the origin and history of them. Now, major warning here, this episode is incredibly spoiler heavy. There's no way to be able to talk about this without having spoilers, and when I talk spoilers, I'm saying it is the spoilers that are going to ruin Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 for you. So if you don't want the narrative of Pillars of Eternity 1 especially ruined, I would forego this entire episode just to be safe. I know some of you are new to the game of Pillars of Eternity because you're excited about Avowed. And I want to try to have as many episodes that are less spoilery as I can, but there's some topics that there's just no way to talk about it without including spoilers. So this is your warning. If you don't want spoilers, tune out now. But for those of you who are okay with spoilers and you want to talk about the origin of the gods, let's continue on.
I'm curious. What exactly did you find there?
All right, so today we're going to be talking about the gods of Eora. Before we dive into the pantheon that's in the Pillars of Eternity games, I want to just take a step back and look at gods and epic fantasy genre stories in general. What is with the trope of having deities in fantasy stories, whether it be games or books or movies? There are a few reasons why I think that they're included a lot and why they're also included in Eora. The first off being that having gods is really good justification for some of the more fantastical parts of the fantasy genre, such as magic. It gives magic a good origin, where it comes from or how someone might have the magic. But more than just being an excuse for certain parts of the world, I think that the big reason that gods and deities are included in fantasy is because they add this deep narrative to the world. I mean, some of the best stories in the fantasy settings have been where gods are the main antagonist or the main protagonist even, or the characters who are half god, half not god, or characters who are champions of gods. They make for wonderful characters, and it adds a supernatural element to the stories. It adds something bigger than just the mundane, and I think it really lends itself to fantasy, having those aspects to it. As well, in particular for games like Pillars of Eternity, any role-playing game where you're trying to play a character, one of the most foundational parts of anyone's life is their view on deities, their religious beliefs. I mean, even if you're a decidedly non-theistic person, atheist or agnostic, that decision, that belief, informs a lot of your other beliefs as well. So it's not just whether or not you believe in a god or gods. And it's the same for characters in fantasy settings as well. So it adds an extra layer to the role-playing part of a role-playing game, especially in something like Dungeons & Dragons. Now, Eora, being a fantasy setting, is no different. Eora has its own unique pantheon of gods, just like any other fantasy setting. The thing that I like about Eora, though, is that the pantheon that exists in this game world is unique to this world. It was handcrafted and handmade by Obsidian Entertainment for this game world. So unlike in other fantasy settings, which have borrowed pantheons from other cultures, perhaps, or other stories. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but it's just something I like interacting with this new metaphysics of the world. So in Eora, there are 11 gods to talk about. And before we get into each god on their own, I think we should just dive into what the gods of Eora are. So the Eoran gods embody ideals. Now, when I say the Eoran gods embody ideals, what I mean is that by their very nature, they express the domains that they are the gods of. I'll give a little bit of background. In other RPGs or fantasy settings, there have been deities that have, say, domain over life, or domain over death, or domain over weather, or something. And there have been attitudes between gods of like, well, this is my domain and that is your domain. So you stay over there, you do your thing, I'll stay over here and do my thing. And it's like a job, right? When I say for the Eoran pantheon that these ideals are expressions of their nature, I mean that it's not so much a duty, like it's a job or an occupation, but that by just expressing the nature of who they are as entities, they embody these ideals. So here's an example that I like to go to, and this is some spoilers for the first DLC of the Pillars of Eternity game, so White March Part 1. If you don't want to have some of the narrative details spoiled, skip ahead a couple minutes. But at one point in history, the goddess Andra grabbed one of the moons of Eora and flung it down to the planet in an effort to destroy civilization. Now, there is another god, Abaddon, who is the god of preservation. And because preservation is a part of his nature, he just naturally interceded to try to stop that from happening. It wasn't that it was his job, like, oh man, I gotta go over there and try to stop this moon from killing them. It's just that was an expression of who he is. And so when we look at the ideals of gods, that's what I mean by natural expression. So each god has its own unique set of ideals that they are in dominion over, that they are in charge of. And as a result, they also have certain dispositions that they favor and other things that they condemn. Now, this is actually introduced in Pillars 1 and 2 as a gameplay mechanic, and I'm really hopeful for Avowed that they'll include this mechanic. So for those not aware of what this mechanic is, if you are playing a priest or paladin, this is especially impactful to your character, but each character has this mechanic as part of their build. Let's say that you are in Pillars of Eternity and someone walks up to you and asks you a question. Obsidian has written a few narrative options that you can choose from, a few of which might be lies. Now, if you select one of the options that are a lie, it will increase your rank in the deception disposition. So your rank in deception will go up. This doesn't necessarily give you any new abilities, like you're not leveling up your deception skill, you're increasing your rank, so it's making you more known as a deceptive person. But more importantly, it is raising your disposition and relating it to perhaps one of the gods. So if you were playing a priest of Skane, for example, that means that you are a priest of the god Skane and you serve his purposes. Now, Skane favors behaviors that are cruel or dishonest, and he condemns behaviors that are benevolent or aggressive. And so in your character build, if you choose options in the game that are cruel or dishonest, you will actually have some of your priest abilities increased in power. But likewise, if you choose any benevolent or aggressive choices in the game, then some of your priestly abilities will be decreased. And so this is a real way to have impact of the game where your choices relate to the god that you serve, and it impacts the way that you play. Now, to be fair to Obsidian, I think they didn't want to break the game for those who felt like they were stuck into a certain roleplay. So the amount that this affects your character by the end of the game is not a lot, at least in my experience. But still, there is a difference, and I really like that mechanic in the game. I want to see that in Avowed, where the choices that you make matter to the god that you serve, if you do serve one. And I will point out, if you play a paladin, you don't serve a god necessarily, but you do take an oath, and whether or not you stay true to that oath through your dispositions will determine whether or not some of your abilities are stronger or weaker. And so when we interact with some of the gods, we have to keep in mind what their dispositions are, what they favor and what they condemn. So that way you can be on their good side or bad side, depending what you're trying to do. We've talked about the gods of Eora and that they embody ideals and that they have favored behaviors that your character can play in game. But who are these gods? Like, who are they? What are their names and what are they in charge of? I'm going to go through each of them with you one by one. Now, each one of these gods, I'm planning on doing an episode for each one of them. So this next part is going to be an overview of their domains and their dispositions, because I want to move into the history and the origin of these gods, because there is some major lore behind that. In alphabetical order, out of the 11 gods, we're going to start with Abaddon. Abaddon, god of crafting and the forge. His portfolio of domains are industry, machines, golems, smiths, skilled trades, apprenticeship, strength, mining and metals, hope, and aspiration. We don't know what his specified dispositions are. Next god is Berith, god of cycles, doorways, portals, mortality, death, and inevitability. Her favored dispositions are stoicism and rationality, and the behaviors that she condemns is cruelty and passion. The next god is Aethys, and I do want to point out quickly before we get into him that he has an alter ego known as Gon, which is a little different. So it's almost like he's got a split personality, which is in line with his dawn and dusk imagery that comes with him. Aethys is the god of renewal and light. He is in dominion over light, redemption, rebirth, dawn, spring, and birth. His favored dispositions are honesty and benevolence, and he despises cruelty or deception. Next god is Galawain, god of the hunt in all of its forms. He is in dominion over pursuit, discovery, perseverance, the hunt, assassins, the wilderness, and predatory beasts. We do not know what his favored and condemned dispositions are. Next deity is Hylia, goddess of the sky, birds, maternity, creativity, language, song, invention, and the arts. We do not know what her favored or condemned dispositions are. Next god is Magran, god of fire, war, consumption, transformation, purification, and trials. Her favored dispositions are aggression and cleverness. Her condemned dispositions are passion and diplomacy. Next god is Andra, goddess of the seas, oceans, and moons. She is in dominion over oceans, seas, forgotten places and things, loss, mourning, the tide, and relentlessness. We do not know what her favored or condemned behaviors are. Next is the god Remergond, also known as the Beast of Winter. He is in charge of cold, winter, famine, entropy, natural disasters, bad luck, and the collapse of nations and empires. His favored behaviors are honesty and rationality, and he condemns benevolence and diplomacy. Next god is Skane. He is the god of defiance, secret hatred, covert plots, resentment, envy, and violent rebellion. His favored dispositions, as we've discussed before, is cruelty and deception, and he condemns aggression and benevolence. Next up is Wal, god of illusions, visions, dreams, secrets, revelations, obfuscation, cryptography, symbols, and perception. His favored dispositions are deception and cleverness, and his condemned dispositions are rationality and honesty. And lastly, we have the goddess Boudica, god of law, justice, oaths and promises, rightful rulership, hierarchies, memory, and vengeance. Her favored behaviors are cruelty and rationality, and she condemns benevolence and diplomacy. And so these are the 11 gods that we're dealing with, and we know some of their dispositions. We know what their dispositions are because when you play a priest in the game, it outlines for you what kind of character you may or may not want to play. The other gods, though, we're left kind of guessing, although some of them make it more obvious than others. I mentioned earlier that there was going to be some major spoilers in this episode. This is where these major spoilers are going to kick in. So if you do not want to have Pillars of Eternity 1 especially, but also Pillars of Eternity 2, if you do not want to have them spoiled for you, cut out of the episode now. I wouldn't listen to the rest of it. But for those of us who are moving on, let's continue forward. The pantheon of Eora has gone by another name, and that is the Engwithan gods. And to back up a little bit, the Engwithans were a society of peoples from way, way before the Pillar times, and these gods have also been called the Engwithan gods. And that is because these deities were created by the Engwithan people. So let's back up to the times when the Engwithans were walking around the earth. These Engwithans, they were technologically advanced people. They had technologies that we are not seeing in the Pillars of Eternity games, and they had mastery over the science of animancy, which is the study of the soul and the substance of the soul. And they lived during a time where nations and factions and cultures were getting into wars over religious beliefs. Just like any war that has to do with belief, it's one person saying one thing and another saying another. So my God is better than your God. My political belief is better than your political belief. My dad can kick your dad's ass. All these, that's the foundation of pretty much all these conflicts, is these differing beliefs between people. And so, theoretically speaking, the Ingwithans are looking out at this tumultuous time. People are fighting over which god is superior to the others. And they decide, you know what? We are advanced enough in animancy that we can do something about this. So they go looking to find the gods. They go looking to find the creators of everything and settle this once and for all, right? I'm speculating a little bit here, but just come with me. So they go looking for the gods. And actually, I'm just going to read for you what it is that they found. So in playing Pillars of Eternity 1, you eventually talk to this spirit of Eora, and she tells you the following about the Ingwithans looking for the gods. Generation after generation, they, the Ingwithans, analyzed the fabric of the world and unlocked its secrets, mastering the science of animancy. One day, they found an answer, except the answer was no answer at all. There were no gods to be found, or if there ever were, they were gone. It was a terrible shock to them. What we have here are these Ingwithans who sought to end these conflicts about religious warfare, and they end up discovering that there's nothing, there's no one there, right? There's either no gods, or if there were, they're gone now, So either atheism or deism is true at this point. And when they discover this, they run into a huge problem, or at least they see the writing on the wall for a huge problem. They start to think, how long before other people discover this, and what is it going to mean, right? The Ingwithans were wrestling with things that real-life philosophers in our world have also wrestled with. In the late 1800s, there was a German philosopher by the name of Friedrich Nietzsche, and he has a lot to say about a lot of different things, and I can't do him justice on this podcast, so we're just going to talk a little bit about something he discussed. Friedrich Nietzsche had talked a lot about the idea that modern society at that point had, done away with the idea of God. And because of this, he saw that people were not going to be beholden to the religious laws of morality. If there is no God watching over us, telling us what to do and what not to do, and not giving us this moral obligation to follow it, what's to stop people from deciding what's right and wrong for themselves, right? Nietzsche saw this as a great threat, I guess, or at least that it was going to lead to horrible warfare. He predicted that because there was no God watching over humanity to tell us what was right and wrong, that the 20th century would be the bloodiest of all the centuries. And oddly enough, it turns out that he was right. According to the website theguardian.com, I'm just looking it up quickly, the 20th century was the most murderous in recorded history. The number of deaths caused or associated with wars have been estimated at 187 million, the equivalent of more than 10% of the world's population in 1913. And you can find more data that corroborates this, but the 20th century did turn out to be the bloodiest of all the centuries. Now, is it because of what Friedrich Nietzsche predicted, or is it because of our advancements in technology and globalization, all that? There's more to this discussion than that. But I mean, certainly the idea that there's no gods that people felt beholden to could certainly lead for people choosing that what they want to do matters. So what's to stop one person from saying, well, what I believe is right is X, Y, and Z, and I don't see any problem with going door to door with the edge of a sword trying to stop people from believing other things, right? And who can stop them at that point, especially if it's an entire nation that believes the same thing? So this is something that Obsidian may or may not have taken into consideration when writing this part of the lore down. And this stuff about the Ingwithans, it's not just, made up fantasy world stuff. This is stuff that people have wrestled with in real life as well. What does the impact of there being no gods mean on morality? And so what the Ingwithans decide to do, instead of allowing this to happen, because what they foresaw would be chaos and destruction, they decide they're going to make gods themselves. Using their mastery of animancy and their understanding of the metaphysics of this world, they create gods out of the soul energy of their people. I have to wonder, I can't imagine that this is something that everybody in the Ingwithan societies all agreed to. That, okay, yeah, no, kill my body, take my soul, put it in a vat with a bunch of other ones, and we'll become deities. Or deities will be made out of me. Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, my kids and my family as well. Yeah, okay, go for it. I can't imagine this was something that happened voluntarily on the entire Ingwithan society's part. There had to be some deception going on. I mean, it's almost funny, the idea that they discovered there were no gods that everyone was beholden to in terms of morality. And so they essentially committed genocide for the greater good that they believed, right? I mean, really, when you get down to what it is, that's what happened. but they weren't responsible to anyone. There was no one telling them what to do, right? So these Ingwithan leaders, or at least the people who discovered this, they devise a way to create the gods out of the soul energy of all the Ingwithan peoples. And so when we see the different ideals that exist between the deities, you can imagine that that must mean that these were the ideals that were aligned with the Ingwithan people. So we can see quite a wide array of beliefs within their society. And really, when you think about it, this solves a lot of the problems that they're trying to address. I mean, you have country A over here and country B over there arguing over which god is greater, and then you, the Ingwithans, come in and say, well, actually, it's this guy right here, and then they can point to the actual god, because I'm sure they would physically manifest themselves and be like, see, it's this guy. Here, god, do your thing. And one of these Ingwithan gods would display their power. People would recognize that they are true gods, and they would go and believe in them, right? So theoretically speaking, anyways, that would end the religious warfare. As well, it would give people someone to be morally obligated to. Be like, okay, well, this is a god, and they say I ought to behave this way. All right. So it solves a lot of the problems that the Ingwithans were really worried about. Now, the only issue is what if people discover the truth of this? And so the Ingwithan people that were remaining anyways, they all agreed to die childless and remove their souls from the cycle of reincarnation called the wheel. That way, nobody would ever be able to carry on this truth so that the fact could be discovered. And by having their souls removed from the cycle of reincarnation, it meant people wouldn't be able to look into previous lives with animancy and discover the truth that way as well. And so they literally sacrificed everything they could as a society to do this. This is something that they obviously believed in so strongly. They were willing to sacrifice themselves and everyone else in their society to make it happen. And so that is the origin of the Eoran pantheon that were born out of the animancy of the Ingwithans. And that's why the Ingwithans are not around during Pillars of Eternity times. That's why the only thing we have left of them are ruins and legends, and why they're such an enigma for the common people of Eora. Now, before we take off, I have one question to put forward to you about the gods of Eora. Now that you know where they're from and how they were made, do you still think of them as gods? Because they all have the power of gods. They're all supernatural entities with supernatural abilities to interact with the world, and they are in charge of the metaphysics of the world. Like Berith, she is in charge of the cycle and reincarnation. And in fact, the cycle of reincarnation actually relies on her now to do it. She has been, I guess I should say it has been doing this for so long that now the metaphysics of this universe is dependent on the existence of these gods. So they're necessary to exist for this world to exist. So are they gods or are they not gods? What do you think? Email me at worldofaeora@gmail.com. Let me know what you think, and maybe I'll be able to get to read some out in the show for the next episode. And so that was the introduction and overview of the gods of Eora, this pantheon that Obsidian has created for us. Sorry, I know my voice has changed a little bit. I had to cut out the old recording because there's some stuff wrong with it, and now I'm re-recording this now a different day. Sorry, that's a bit jarring. But regardless, thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of The World of Eora, where we lay this foundation and groundwork. Moving forward, we can discuss each of the gods individually. I'll do my best to leave the rest of those episodes as spoiler minimal as possible, depending on which god we're talking about. Thank you guys so much for feedback I've been getting. If you want to reach out to me, please do. My email, as I've mentioned before, is worldofaeora@gmail.com, and the Twitter is @worldofaeora. I've been your host, Eric, aka Gingerino, and I'll see you guys next time.